Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm reading Jordan Peterson. He's a best-selling author. He's selling millions of copies of a book, 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos. Chaos, the key. And he's on YouTube. He has millions of followers. He's controversial. And I'm reading him. I'm trying to see the controversy. And I'm liking him quite a bit. I don't see him as someone pushing a political worldview overtly. We could make some inferences, but I really do see his book as trying to be helpful to everybody, and I don't think that the points he makes about self-reliance in this dark world are excluding us from social justice, concerns for social justice. So I really am impressed with his first chapter about lobsters. Now that got criticism too. Some biologists say comparing lobsters to human beings, you know, there's a lot of biological inaccuracies in that. But to me, that's not the point. The point is he's using an allegory. He's trying to teach us a lesson through allegory, and I think there's enough accurate points in his comparison, however imperfect it is, between lobsters and human beings, that it's super helpful to us, super beneficial to us, super beneficial to my college students. And one of the things that he's doing, he doesn't want us to be naive, to think we live in this world where we all help each other. You know, lobsters are very territorial, and there's something that Jordan Peterson says in that chapter. We live in a zero-sum game. And a zero-sum game is brutal. That means you got takers and losers. And I would rather my students know this than me delude them and me perpetuate any kind of naivete. The second thing he does that I find invaluable in this chapter is he identifies negative feedback loops that put us in a perpetual motion of failure. He also identifies positive feedback loops that will help us be successful, and he gives us really good advice on how to take away our negative feedback loops and move into a positive feedback loop. I find that so helpful. I would like to teach this to my students. I find 5 important life lessons in the chapter about the lobsters. Now this chapter is called Stand Up and Keep Your Shoulders Back. It's about having a self-confident posture. And the first life lesson that he gives us is that we're fighting for territory. We're fighting for zip code. I live in Torrance. I live about 1.5 miles from the beach. Life's pretty good here. The pollution's not too bad. The stress levels aren't too bad. Crime is not too bad. You know, you can probably live a pretty decent life here. Probably good life expectancy, good health. And it's brutal trying to live here. There's a shortage of inventory. Like a tiny little house costs $0.9 million, and there'll be bidding wars. And I've gone over this before on previous videos. You go 7 miles east of here to Wilmington, where they have oil refineries, and there are spikes in asthma, cancer, heart disease. You go to anywhere where you're 1 mile or closer to a freeway and you have spikes in heart disease, cancer, dementia. Where you live determines what kind of life you have. And lobsters fight for the choicest places to live at the bottom of the sea because they know. And we need to know. And that's a huge lesson. Who has the resources to live in the choice coastal areas? It's a fight, and it's a brutal fight, and you need to know that when you plan your life. When you plan your life. The second point that he makes is we live in a zero-sum game. What is that? That is a brutal principle. And what it pretty much says is the winners and the takers, every time they win, every time they take, someone loses. It's like the strong get stronger and the weak pay for it. It's totally unfair and no one cares. If you're getting the short end of the stick, there's no one, you know, to raise their hand and say, I'll help you. When I was young and my parents were divorced and we were struggling financially, I never had a mentor. I do mentorships now I'll talk about that in a second, but I never had a mentor. And so it's a zero-sum game. If you have the kind of money to go to $1,000 a night luxury hotel in Maui, someone's cleaning your bathroom who's not making a lot of money and who doesn't have the best life expectancy and the best quality of life. We live in a zero-sum game. I would rather my students know the brutality of this than make them naive. The third point that he makes is that your social ranking affects your dopamine, your hormones. When a lobster beats another lobster, its serotonin rises, it elevates, and he's walking around all big and proud, and all the females want him, and the loser, he cowers with lowered levels of this hormone, serotonin, and this hormone level is a huge part of whether we become successful or we become failures. Jordan Peterson makes an interesting point for his fourth life lesson. A lot of us can fall into negative feedback loops due to this hormone elevation or decrease I was talking about. If you were bullied as a kid, if you were abused as a kid, if you were unloved as a kid, what happens is you have low levels of serotonin. People don't want to be around you. This reinforces your low self-worth. This in turn lowers your hormones. This is a horrible cycle. It's a horrible negative feedback loop. The positive feedback loop is what Jordan Peterson is trying to get people to do. How do you do that? Self-care. Self-care. Get off social media. Don't be on social media all the time advertising how lonely you are. Eat correctly. Eat whole foods if you can. Exercise regularly. Get sleep. And all of this sounds so obvious. Here's how not obvious apparently it is. I'm reading Jordan Peterson. Turns out that when a doctor gives you a prescription, most people will fill it out, but 30% don't. 30% people don't fill their prescription. And the people who do, only half follow the instructions. Jordan Peterson goes on to say that people are more inclined to follow prescription instructions for their dog than they are for their own self. What does that say about human self-worth? If you take care of yourself, if you walk with good posture, your hormones begin to change. People react to you differently. And this creates a positive feedback loop. I want my students to know this so badly. I mean, think about this. If you're a student in my class and you're all in your studies, imagine how different you are from the student who's kind of half-hearted, who's not all in. What does that say about the track you're going into? I've got some students, I mentor them. A lot of them are successful. 2 of them just became engineers. You know what? I take zero credit. I think it's all them. I look at their behavior, and they were like the competitive lobster. They saw what the stakes were. They saw the zero-sum game. They may not have had the words for it, but Jordan Peterson's done a good job, I think, with this allegory. Called the 12 Rules for Life. Urge you to read it. Tell me what you think about this presentation. Until next time, I'm out.